The show goes on. Welcome to another episode of the Jake and Joe Bengals preview show. We're getting ready for week 3 here, presented by First Star Logistics. You can find us, of course, on the First Star Logistics YouTube channel that you're watching on right now. Make sure you stick around on Sunday after the game for the live Jake and Joe Bengals post-game show, during which we will run through our giveaways, we'll react to the game, we'll talk about the biggest stories emerging around the Cincinnati Bengals. And today, unfortunately, the biggest story is still Joe Burrow, even as we're late into this week and even as we're looking ahead toward the week 3 opponent, the road trip to Minnesota, the first of a 3 out of 4 game road stretch. Joe, the discourse, rightfully so, is still largely focused on the conditions that lead to these injuries for Joe Burrow. That's where we're going to start the show today. Before we get to really the matchup of the game that's interesting to us is more so when the Bengals are on offense, the Vikings are on defense. The Vikings offense going to a backup quarterback, Aaron Jones not playing, so injuries piling up on that side of the ball that we'll talk about a little bit as well. But like I said, we've got to start with the structural conversation about this team as it pertains to Joe Burrow. But we want to remind you about the awesome giveaways we have going on this week. We've got that Yeti Bengals license tailgate set, which includes several pieces, one of which Joe is currently showing off, that some of the Yeti stuff that exists. Really high quality tailgate gear that you can win. Make sure you're following at First Star Log on X to make sure you see all the details about how to enter these giveaways. And if you're here for the post-game show live, you'll have another chance to win in the YouTube chat as well. And also a reminder that, well, First Star Logistics is hiring. If you'd like to work with First Star Logistics like Joe and I do, make sure you check out firststarlogistics.com. They're looking for people to expand their brokerage department. So if you're looking for that fast-paced career in the logistics industry with one of the fastest growing companies in the Cincinnati area, one of the best companies to work with in the Cincinnati area, firststarlogistics.com for all those details. Now, Joe, let's dive into the conversation around Joe Burrow's injury. Very pedestrian football play. I think the play itself has been picked apart. It's a quick game. Dalton Reisner gets beat on one side. A stunt isn't cleanly handled on the other side of the offensive line. Jamar Chase gets jammed. Ball should be out, but it's 2nd and 20. And Joe Burrow just killing a play because Jamar Chase get jammed isn't in his blood. He's trying to keep that drive alive. He's trying to extend the play, trying to get a handful of yards back so that they get into a 3rd and manageable situation and not a 3rd and draw play punt situation. A lot going on there, of course. The play itself, though, reminds me a little bit of that play against the Ravens where the wrist gets hurt, where, yeah, somebody loses in protection, but it's a normal football hit. A lot of times there's no injury on those plays, but the more hits you take as a quarterback, the more you have an injury on plays where you say, usually there's not an injury on that play.
And I think from an offensive structural point of view, the more times you're asking quarterback just to straight drop back, read the defense, and make the right throw on the right time, especially with this offensive line, that should be better than it is. But I think you're exposing the offensive line more often when you're doing this. And when you're asking your quarterback to do this, you're putting him in harm's way. He's been hit more than anybody. He's been sacked more than anybody since his career started. And you have to look at structurally, how do you change that? It's not just another first-round pick on the offensive line, right? It's not just throwing money at these mid-tier guards that get overpaid in free agency. Not defending the Bengals' decision-making because you didn't sign Dalton Reisner until September. But the idea that it's all the offensive line and that they don't care about the offensive line, I think is misguided, right? I think what it really is that you have Burrow in shotgun, dropping back to throw as much as anybody, if not more than anybody in the league. And what that means is he's going to get hit because of his play style. Jake, you and I were doing a podcast daily together when Joe Burrow was a prospect, right? We talked about, I can remember it vividly. I wonder if you remember this. we talked about all of his strengths, right? We were in love at that time. Like Burrow, yeah, like he should be the pick. This is somewhere January, that Clemson game, probably that championship game. And we are talking about all the good things he has, and then some of the weaknesses. He doesn't have a great arm. It's good, but it's not great. And he's kind of on the slender side. He takes hits. He takes sacks at a high rate. His percentage of sacks was high even in college. And that could lead to him getting injured because of the way he plays. But we love the way he plays. It is what it is. Everyone raves about his toughness and how he can take hits and just keep getting up. And we've kind of worn that as a badge of honor. But at the same time, I've always known that if this continues to happen, he's going to have more injuries than the next guy. And he has. And at this point, you have to, because the first two felt like freak injuries, right? Rookie year, he's taking a beating, guy goes into his knee. It happens. Actually, we have literally seen it happen before to the franchise quarterback. And then the second one was the calf, and then the calf again. And then he can't really get out of the way, and he just falls on his wrist. Man, what tough luck, just as it felt like he was getting healthy again. And now it happens again. Well, luck is a very small part of the conversation. Even though it looks like bad luck, you can't keep having bad luck. You can't keep tempting the bad luck to get you. And the Bengals keep doing that. And I think at this point, we need to talk about how you can move forward and change that so we're not risking it so often.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's maybe you have to roll a 1 on a 100-sided dice, which for the D&D nerds out there, that's a big throwback to our long time ago daily podcast. Another thing that we talked about. That's actually a thing, 100-sided dice. It's actually 2 dice that go 1 to 10 each, but you have to roll a 1. And maybe it's a 1% chance, right? But if you take 200 hits, the odds of you hitting a 1 in 200 hits is pretty high. And that's what I'm saying when I say, even if it's a play where normally there's no injury, and even if there is an injury, normally it's a 2 to 4 week injury, every now and then it's not. And Joe's been able to play through some of these before, some of these minor injuries, some of these bumps and bruises, and strains of ligaments that are stretches, not tears. And in this case, there's about as severe as a turf toe, it sounds like, as you can get, to the point where it needs that surgery. The only other quarterback that I want to draw a comparison to here before we circle back to how the Bengals can fix this, which is going to sound glaringly obvious in my opinion when we get there, although there are some depth answers we can get to as well, is Patrick Mahomes, the only other quarterback to have this surgery. And that was after a milder turf toe that he played through and worsened on a Super Bowl run in 2020, had the surgery 3 days after the Super Bowl. And the reason that it's interesting that it's Mahomes is because if you look at the last couple years, last year especially, the only quarterback, according to Pro Football Reference, that took more hits than Joe Burrow was Patrick Mahomes in 2024. And he had a whole lot less dropbacks than Joe Burrow, threw a whole lot more screenplays than Joe Burrow, threw a whole lot more play action plays than Joe Burrow did in 2024. But Patrick Mahomes has a couple things going for him. I think that Joe doesn't. He seems to have some sort of, ligament, tendon,
Super elasticity.
Yeah, I don't even know what the word is, but the way he comes back from high ankle sprains, the way he played on the turf toe injury, the way he's recovered from some of these things over the years, it seems like he's got some of that, some genetic advantage perhaps, but also he has an interior offensive line. And so even when he's taking hits, I think one of the big differences here, and to me, the most obvious way you address this is you finally fix your interior offensive line and you stop going with these journeyman options. I think Dylan Fairchild is a step in the right direction. I'm starting to have some concerns, Joe, about Ted Karras starting to show some signs of decline a little bit. Like he's still solid for the most part, but I'm starting to have some concern that Ted Karras is starting to see his age show up, and he's really defied that for his time in Cincinnati. And then Dalton Reiser at 30, this could be another example of a guy that's just hitting that age cliff and giving you the Bengals argument for, hey, this is why we don't usually play in this part of the age pool, and why maybe there was some reluctance and hesitation to bring him in after going with Lucas Patrick instead, who isn't really younger. But point aside, they haven't gone the Chiefs' approach, let's say, to addressing the interior line. And part of that is the Chiefs kind of got lucky with Trey Smith as a late round pick. But They spent the big money on Joe Tooney. They drafted Creed Humphrey. Both of those are moves that the Bengals had the opportunity to make. And I know that's a long time ago now, but you see how those paths have diverged in those two systems that both pass the ball a lot, with the running game being mostly secondary.
Yeah, and that last point is where I was going to go. Then, if we can say, yeah, let's fix the interior offensive line, can I also say let's take the run game a little bit more seriously? And
Absolutely.
that is also what's exposing the Chiefs, I think, in a lot of ways. Like they don't have the deep weapons anymore. They're really struggling on offense lately. Mahomes has taken hits. The offensive line has been an issue for him. Although Josh Simmons looks really good so far. I don't know if you've seen any of that. Of course, they got him. Anyways, the point is they really haven't respected their own run game. Yeah, they spent a first on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but after that, 7th rounders, Samaje Perines, Jerick McKinnon's, right? They're really not investing in it. And then you go to the Bengals side of it, and they, while Mixon was a good runner, that was the last time they had a legit, I can get under center and we can pound this out if we have to. And it was in a consistent run game at the time. We wanted more at the time. We wanted a run game that complemented the passing offense more. Well, we got it, and I don't think it's a good running game at all. In fact, I'm surprised it took a step back somehow this year through 2 games, so maybe they'll figure it out. But there's no run game coordinator this time around. The offensive coaches that are left are managing that part, and maybe that's an issue. It doesn't look like they even care to run the ball at times. The offensive line doesn't look like they have to worry about run blocking because it's just going to be a throw on the next 2 plays anyways. So what are we worried about? And that's more of a mental thing, I think, when you watch teams that fundamentally believe they can run the ball and run it down your throats, they come off the ball different. They look more in sync on the offensive line. They play with more toughness, more power. You can keep the offense in advantageous situations. The Bengals went full throw the ball, and we'll worry about the run game if it ever becomes an issue. And I don't trust them in short yardage. I don't trust them to keep it ahead of the sticks and keep the game flowing in their direction. And what it's leaving them is 3rd and longs and 2nd and longs, where the other team looks like, first of all, they don't care that you're going to run the ball on 1st down. There were plays where the Bengals and the Jags, I posted that. It had to be yesterday on the film review, Bengals on the Brain, or on Tuesday. And the Burrow's under center, and there's 2 tight ends on the field, and everyone's in tight, and the Jags have 2 safeties deep. They don't care. They they're the play where that leads to the injury to Joe Burrow is that situation, and it's a screen to Chase Brown, which the screens have sucked too. Can we figure out a way to get those to work as well? Like that
They
can take a
somehow
lot out.
do with Browning.
It's weird. So let's figure that out. But you get in that situation, and the Jags just do not care that you're at least faking to run the ball. They don't care. You watch it, and they're like, yeah, run it if you want. You're only getting 2 yards anyways. Your guys aren't getting a push. No one's firing off the ball. No one's sustaining blocks. We can't climb to the 2nd level. It looks terrible. And they've done a lot on the offensive line. Like over 6 years now, there have been a lot of different starters. There's been 3 different O-line coaches. It is not a part of their foundation to have this run game be a center part of the offense. And it has to change because you've got to lessen the hits on Burrow. And if that means half the offense is Burrow's offense and the other half is whatever you need it to be to run the ball, use play action, use screens, and get the ball out of his hand quicker and safer, then that's what it has to be, in my opinion.
I think that there's this fundamental organizational disregard for the run game that you're describing there, because it's not just a coaching staff and it's not just the way Joe Burrow wants to run offense, because they have tried all these different things to get the running game going over the years. They've been many adjustments. They figured it out once that we keep going back to with Joe Mixon all those years ago when they actually had one of the more efficient running games in the NFL, because by success rate standards, they were getting
2022.
those 4 to 5. Yeah, they were getting those 4 to 5 yard runs. They could win in short yardage. Been a long time now. And you've gone through the offensive line coaches in that time. You've gone through offensive coordinators in that time, but fundamentally they are approaching team building and offense the same way. And you understand why. Like if you listen to Dan Pitcher talk about this, and he did this week, they've got these awesome skill players and these wide receivers that they made this huge effort to retain in the offseason. They have that quarterback in Joe Burrow. It makes sense that you would look for guys that are better pass blockers and run blockers. But when you're getting, I've seen many people talk about this, maybe even you, Joe, when you're getting those like BB plus pass blockers that are pretty good in pass protection, Dalton Risner this year aside, the protection from the linemen hasn't been terrible. Like, I know some people want to point at certain pressures, free runners, like the running backs have had some issues. Drew Sample's had some issues to the point where I think Drew Sample is increasingly a liability to put on the football field,
Mhm.
uh, which we can talk about at some point, maybe kind of low priority this week. But you're prioritizing pass blocking to the severe detriment of your run game. Like when they signed Dalton Risner, it was, yeah, he should be fine as a pass blocker, which we'll see if that turns out to be the case or not. So far, a step back. I did acknowledge when they signed him that it's probably the hardest pass blocking he's ever done in his career compared to a Kevin O'Connell offense, for example, or a Kubiak offense in Denver. Like, just way more stress on you in pass protection in a Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor offense. But run blocking for Risner is kind of like a secondary thing to his game. It's never been a strength to his game. The same is true for Orlando Brown. The same is true for Ted Karras. The same has been true for Amarius Mims. And we'll see how long we go before we're saying that about Dylan Fairchild, who, if you had to guess right now, is probably their best run blocker, but is a rookie and is just being indoctrinated into the system. So it's not just that they, haven't tried stuff. It's not just that there's a mentality that's like, hey, when we need something, we're just dropping back and throwing. Those are both issues to some degree. I think there's just like this organizational deprioritization of the run game. And even the stuff that they've tried, when they have tried to innovate and they have tried to commit to it, they just don't have the guys to block it, to the point that even when they're getting all these light boxes, they're just getting beat so badly. Like that example you give, like you try to hand the ball off when you see the two safeties up and you're showing run, still only getting 2 yards because somebody's losing.
Yeah, and it can't continue. And that's why I've come to that conclusion after the last injury to Burrow, that whatever it takes to lessen his hits, and that may mean a less functional offense, because we have to also acknowledge that part. The offense has been very good under Joe
Mm-hmm.
Burrow and Zach
Yep.
Taylor and Dan Pitcher and Brian Callahan, right? That even with the bad offensive lines, it's one of the best offenses in the league, especially once it gets rolling. Like if you take away those first couple of weeks in their data, they have a great offense when Burrow's out there. But he's still getting hit and you're still risking it. So if that means I got to pull back the offense just a little bit in order to take 30% of his hits away, it is worth that. And then maybe you get, and I live in Buffalo. They talked about this with Josh Allen and the Bills. They're like, maybe we're not going to run Josh as much early in the season. But once we get to the end and once we get to the playoffs, unleash Josh Allen and let him do his thing so we can win in those ways, right? A quarterback scramble, EPA wise, is probably the biggest play in football right now. For Burrow and the Bengals offense, maybe we control it for half the season and then you unleash it. He's pretty bad in September anyway. So let's control it and try and get a better offense that's more balanced early in the season. And then you unleash him slowly. And as you get to the end of the season, he's full Joe Burrow and healthy. And you get to the playoffs. And now I can drop back and throw with anybody because I do think those quarterbacks are more successful in the playoffs. So I want to get him there. But you're struggling to get him there half of the seasons now. And that's really what it falls on. I'm willing to take a step back on offense in order to trade off potentially keeping him healthy.
I wonder how that jives with your decision to pay T. Higgins and allocate all those resources on the skill player part of the team from a team building perspective. I think there's an entire conversation to be had there because of where the investment has gone, how they've invested even in their offensive line. Like I said, the prioritization on pass blocking and putting the team together, the way they've addressed the tight end position, where they have 1.5 real tight ends on the roster. I'd like to see Cam Grandy get more of a shot. Like that's the level of discourse that we're at this point with the tight end position. And you go watch it compared to a team like Washington, where Jaden Daniels has obviously been very good as a passer, but you have John Bates, who's probably the best run blocking tight end in the NFL. Or even go look at Buffalo, where Dawson Knox has been good. Jackson Hawes has been really good to start the season in the run game. Maybe just import the Buffalo, go get Joe Brady, go get Aaron Cromer. But that's a conversation probably for, I don't know, several months from now, depending on how how the rest of the season goes. I think it's just a multifaceted issue, right, Joe? Like it's a personnel issue, it's an approach issue, it's a this is how Joe Burrow likes to play issue, and it works. It works, and that's the hardest thing about it, I think, is like, how do you shut down something that's so successful? And that's where, again, I understand where Dan Pitcher's coming from. How do you ask Joe to say, you know what, Joe, we're not going to try on this play, when you've got Joe Burrow and you've got Jamar Chase and you've got T. Higgins, you've got all this money tied up in those guys, and you say, you know what, Joe, you're taking too many hits. You got to
Just
take
throw
the
it
ball out of
away.
your hands.
Yeah. Just run it on 3rd and 12 because we just can't risk you. But I think it's the early downs, really. I think if you are better early downs and more balanced early downs,
Oh, no doubt.
that gets you to advantageous 2nd and 3rd downs. And that's when you drop back and throw the ball. Like that's ideally if you're I watch the Rams offense because they're very spread, but also get down and run the ball as well. I feel like the Lions without Ben Johnson first week, not a lot of motion stuff. Last week, they tore it up against the Bears. They were into it, but they were very under center run and then spread it out, throw when they had to be on any 3rd and 5+. And I'm like, that looks like balance to me. And it doesn't work if you're going for 1.5 yards per carry, right? That it doesn't work. You can't do it. I can't run the ball if I'm getting 2 yards per carry. But if you can get that to being 4, 5, you are now an efficient run game. You can, and it's worthy, and it gets your offense moving in the right direction. So to completely abandon it the way it feels like they have, I think is the biggest malpractice we're looking at in this offense, and it's really the big area I keep going to.
I keep going back to Zach Taylor's roots and Sean McVay, the way that those offenses have been run. Matt Stafford's a good quarterback, but that offense is run differently than the way the Bengals are doing it in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. And there probably should be some differences, but if you want to talk about a system that strikes that balance often pretty well, go back to the Super Bowl. Even one of the reasons that game was close is because the Rams couldn't run the ball. If the Rams could run the ball in that game, or the Bengals could run the ball, I guess if either team could run the ball in that game, probably get a very different game. But the season does go on, however, and so the Bengals play a football game on Sunday. And one of the big topics last time this happened, and even on Sunday when it happened this year, is how the offense changes to some extent for Jake Browning. The difference this time around is they're not going to run him out there and run the Joe Burrow offense against Pittsburgh Steelers and say, just treat me like I'm Joe. We're not going to get that again. We're going to see those adjustments. They know much, much better now what Jake Browning can and cannot do, what he's good at, what he's comfortable with, what works with him at quarterback. Let's just go to the most recent game, Joe, and then we'll look at the last time these teams played, and it was Jake Browning at quarterback. What were the things that stood out to you in terms of what changed immediately when Jake Browning came into the game for Joe Burrow?
I think it was the immediate need to get the ball to Jamar Chase in any way possible. And I think that started with a couple screens. These are easy throws. Get him out to him. Let him make a play. I also think it's funny because it's the discourse afterwards can sometimes cloud my picture when I go back and watch the film because I didn't think the offensive line was that much better. And some people have said, why was the line so much better for Browning than it was Burrow? And I think, yeah, maybe at points, but it didn't feel like the Vikings, or not the Vikings, the Jags had as many games to show the Bengals in the second half. I feel like Burrow would have carved them up as well because they just didn't have it. They depleted everything in that first few drives. And
They
really
showed their hand, and the
they
Bengals
did.
started making protection adjustments that would have also occurred if Joe Burrow were on the field.
They did because there was nothing new afterwards. After that, Burrow got hurt. It was a couple things they ran in the first few drives, and that the Burrow Bengals beat and understood what was happening. So I think it would have been fine. Plus, you get the screens, and I think that slows down the pass rush a little bit, and that's a big part. And I go back to 2023, and we did see more running the ball. We did see more screens. We did see more play action. All different things on the first two downs. That the things we're not getting with the Burrow offense. And then on third down, and because I just watched that Bengals Vikings game from 2023, it was the drop back, huck it, chuck it, Joe Burrow offense. And I think we saw that in the Jags game as well. And Browning just tried to force a few throws. He ended up with 3 picks, because he's trying to make something happen, because he's willing to throw it. I think that's a big difference where Burrow, 2.9 something seconds, he was holding the ball in the Jags game. That's not like him. That's not normal. He's had those games, but it's not a normal occurrence. When Burrow's firing, that thing's coming out in 2.5 and sometimes even less. And I think there were some plays in his first 3 drives before he got hurt where I thought he would probably get that ball out a little bit quicker or test that a little bit more later in the season. I felt this way through 2 games, to be honest with you, where Browning gets there and he's like, I'm throwing it. I do not care. And there's some advantages to that, to saying, I don't care if I throw an interception or if I throw it into harm's way. Let T go make a play. Let Jamar go make a play. Let Noah Fant or Mike Gesicki go do something for you. You have these weapons. So like, as Dan Pitcher saying, like, we've got these weapons, we need to throw it. You do. And sometimes you just need to throw it and let them go make a play. It's funny because I was just looking at like EPA data for Browning and Burrow for that game, and Browning way over Burrow, right? But I'm like, sacks must count much more negatively in the EPA metrics than interceptions do. Because I'll tell you, interceptions are worse than sacks. Just any football guy, any football fan knows that's a turnover on downs, unless it's third and whatever, and you're just throwing it up. But point being is, Burrow's willing to take that sack, I think, rather than throw that ball into harm's way. And Browning's the other way. So it makes for some exciting, fun games, and we got a fun finish out of it. And if he wasn't willing to throw some of those balls, I don't know if the Bengals come back in that game.
Yeah, standing in against the blitz, when he was blitzed, he was fantastic. And you think about the T. Higgins touchdown as a great example of this. When he was pressured against a four-man rush, he was not so fantastic. That's where some of the YOLO balls came from. And some of those interceptions are pretty unforgivable, if we're being real. Like, those are balls that you're going to die with. You're going to live and die with Jake Browning, obviously. And you appreciate the quick trigger. But the thing that he doesn't have that Joe has, well, a few things, but the processing speed isn't there. So you get to these situations where it's a panic chuck it, or, you go 1-2 and then you're like, all right, I'm just going to throw the backside dig and not be aware that there's a linebacker sitting in that window and just get an easy interception, linebacker blindness kind of thing. So obviously the offense will change with Jake Browning. I think the biggest difference is probably that you're going to get more screen game, and Jake Browning, I think, is willing to turn his back to the offense. So you're going to see a little bit of an evolution in terms of the kinds of play action game, the kind of screen game they emphasize, trying to get the ball into the hands of Jamar Chase, into the hands of these playmakers, trying to get him that ball in space a little bit. That's, like you said, the immediate emphasis that we saw from the Bengals against Jacksonville. And like you said, also, and we're talking about here, they'd had the opportunity to see, okay, this is how Jacksonville's playing the game. These are our adjustments off of this. They saw a lot more quarters, was a big difference. When Browning came in versus Burrow, they were actually playing some cover 2, which they hadn't done at all really in week 1, Jacksonville to Burrow. But then when Browning comes in, all their middle field open pre-snaps looks turn out to be cover 4. Helps to get that safety into the run fit is a big part of that, as Max Toscano pointed out when I pointed out that coverage scheme change. But the Vikings this week, I think, even crazier on defense than the Jaguars. And I don't think it's crazy to say that at all. Brian Flores is going to blitz. He's going to make it very difficult. And it is somewhat similar to what the Jags do, at least from a pre-snap look. Like, he's going to load up the line of scrimmage. He's going to wait and see how you adjust your protection. And he's going to try to send guys where you've adjusted your protection. And that's the whole idea of Brian Flores blitzes quite often. He puts a lot on those guys, but they're figuring out who can come, who can't come, who needs to drop, who needs to blitz based on the protection that they get. And they're trying to make it so you can't be right as you're setting your protection. Of course, Jake Browning has faced the Vikings and famously said that they should not have cut him. But what are your expectations then, Joe, when you think about that matchup? That, like I said, we could talk about the Bengals defense and some issues they have to correct there. Maybe we'll have time for that. Maybe we won't. But Vikings offense, it's going to be a Kevin O'Connell offense, but totally different quarterback. Still Justin Jefferson over there, different running back. They have
No
offensive line issues. They might be on left tackle number 3 if Christian Darrisaw isn't back, and that's unclear as we're recording this. They've got a couple linemen, I think, in concussion protocol as well. So that's why we're focusing on this side of the ball. But what do we think we're getting from this Minnesota defense this year?
And no Jordan Addison also is still suspended for one more game. The Vikings D, though, that talent-wise, not good. I don't know if you've looked at the depth chart and really seen who they've got out there recently. Maybe you want to pull up our lads. It doesn't look very good. It's really Brian Flores carrying what they are getting with the scheme and when they're forcing some turnovers, because they're doing a lot of stuff they always have. They'll show you a lot of things. They'll throw you blitzes you have never seen before, and it'll take you a minute on film to be like, what is this? And what is the coverage? And what's going on? And you'll confuse some quarterbacks with it. And they got Jake Browning last time with a couple of plays also. That game started off 17-3, I want to say. Vikings over the Bengals until the Bengals made a comeback there at the end and forced it into overtime. But I expect like you pointed out with the Jags, very similarly showing you blitzes. Although if you look at the coverage chart, the Vikings play more cover 2, cover 4, cover 6, and they'll just get to it in different ways, right?
Yeah.
They're going to send you different. They're going to send 4 or 5 from different positions, and they're going to get to an umbrella coverage to keep you from just chucking it down the field. So it's going to be interesting. And will T be Superman and go make a play like he did last time? And even Tyler Boyd made a couple plays, and Joe Mixon at the time made some nice inside power running, even though he had a couple blitz protection mess ups, because it's going to be confusing. They can't have those mess ups this time. We had in the first 3 drives an error by Samaje Perine and Chase Brown in the last game. You can't have those. You got to be able to pick up the right guys, and they're going to make it hard on you.
And Drew Sample had a very difficult time in pass protection and in run blocking. I mean, the whole reason they're in that 1st and 20, 2nd and 20 situation, you go watch the 1st and 20 before Joe got hurt. It's a worse hit. They had a really bad stretch of plays there where it's a sample hold, a high-low from the 2 good edge rushers on Jacksonville because 2 guys lost. Joe Burrow gets flipped over essentially, and then the injury play in consecutive plays. But you're right. I mean, even Harrison Smith dealing with an injury on that defense as well. So like it's Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Grenard, Ivan Pace, and like some dudes. And they have some guys that in Hargrave,
Murphy
Allen,
is a good corner
later in their careers. Sure. But the Dallas Turner is going to be, a speed rusher that you're going to have to deal with to some
it's
degree.
Not great
but
though. That's run of the mill.
Yeah. Nothing here is like terrifying you. Grenard is good. Hargrave is good. Allen is good, but Hargrave and Allen later in their careers at this point, not like you're going to see with the Pittsburgh Steelers or even the Baltimore Ravens in the division, or go back to week 1 in the Cleveland Browns. But you mentioned
there's no Malik Collins even. Collins has been on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Good signing. And if the offense for the Vikings is down to second quarterback, they got Justin Jefferson, Jalen Naylor, Adam Thielen. So at least they got those guys. But that left side of that offensive line, Donovan Jackson's been struggling to start.
Yeah.
If Christian Darrisaw doesn't get back and they're down to Walter Rouse, who's last year's 6th round pick at left tackle, should be another very exploitable matchup for Trey Hendrickson as the rest of this pass rush still needs to figure it out. He's got a concussion, so we'll see.
Yeah. Okay.
May or may not be. If he is out, I don't really know where they go. Looking at it, it might be Michael Juergens, who was a 7th round pick last year.
Is that Cam's brother, Cam Juergens?
You would think, but who knows? A lot of guys play this sport, right? But point I'm trying to make here is Trey Hendrickson should win. Can anyone else step up in the pass rush? Still, the answer has been no, which has really exposed some of their corners. I don't think DJ Turner was as bad as his PFF grade last week. I think it was that they're in cover 3 or they're in positions where if the pass rush doesn't get home, you're losing every time. If you're DJ Turner, you just have no chance based on your pre-snap alignment, based on what the play call is. And so that is something, one of my other tabs right now is an article from Coach Vass about Fangio cover 3 and how the NFL figured out how to deal with the McVay crossers that just the McVay over routes that pervaded the NFL at the time when, everyone was trying to play Legion of Boom cover 3. And then you suddenly needed a solution in your cover 3 to deal with these crossers that were just constantly 20-yard plays. And that's been an issue for the Bengals this year with all those condensed sets that we saw from Liam Cohen on Sunday. That was an issue. And with Justin Jefferson and Carson Wentz, I would expect they're going to try to test you that way again if you're continuing to play a lot of single high, which has been Al Golden's go-to approach. You just need to help your guys a little bit more to deal with some of those cover 3 beaters because you're seeing a lot of them, obviously.
59%, if I remember correctly, if you saw the same chart, they're either in cover 1 or cover 3. Was that right?
I do not recall. I do not have it in front of me right now.
I retweeted it yesterday. I think it was 59% for those two. So single high safety most of the time.
Yeah. And they're getting to like cover 6 a little bit, which is where you're playing quarters on one side of the field, cover 2 on the other side of the field. It's call it cover 6 because 2 + 4 is 6. So you're seeing some 6 from them, which means there's probably some 9 in there as well, which doesn't really get charted by the people that chart coverages, which is like the opposite of 6. But there's not much very little cover 2 from this defense, I would say. But you mentioned a T. Higgins play, and we like to look at at
That's right.
least
We got
a
plays.
play. And we can go back to the last time these teams played. This is, uh, well, let's just watch the play because this is
Okay.
good stuff.
No, this has got to be the Tyler Boyd play, if I remember correctly. So they're in overtime here. So if you want to get the T play, great.
We'll
But
go to
this is
both.
all right. They're going to rotate into a cover two, and then we've got the dagger route. Right, they've been running this for years. This is really 2022. They started spamming this, and then 23 here, we're going to hit Jake Browning going a little off script, and Boyd stays with it and finds himself open. This is what gets them into field goal range as somehow he stays on his feet. I don't know if you recall that play. I didn't until I rewatched the game, and I was like, "Oh yeah, what a great play by Boyd!" And then the chip shot field goal from there to end it in overtime.
This is a great example of the downside of dagger is that it does take time to come open. There's a play the Bengals run in week 1 where Yosavash is just a little bit slow to get open, to get into his break, to get, because they motion into dagger on that particular play. And sometimes you do have to get off your spot, buy a little extra time. And you're right. Great job for Tyler Boyd to get through 3 Vikings there and extend that play. But let's also look at the T. Higgins play, the play that, well,
Play of his career,
T's career, Jake Browning's career. It's not
probably.
actually a great play from Browning, but the result is exemplary.
The blitz from the Vikings here. So you see it. Mixon fails to pick it up. You've got that out route outside, and then you're going to split both of these cover 3 defensive backs. It's good design by the Bengals. It's Browning buying time also because the blitz is not picked up correctly. So 2 plays in a row of Browning buying time. And yeah, we're going to see the slide of the offensive line here. And then Mixon's got to come up and pick it up here between Tanner Hudson and at the time Jonah Williams at left tackle. And we're going to see once it's missed, Browning's going to go and make a play.
Orlando Brown at left tackle.
Is
But
it?
it is.
Yeah,
But
Jonah's that right.
the point that I'm pausing at here is just to show the blitz. So you have this guy who's showing blitz dropping out. Jonah Williams' eyes still out here. You have Harrison Smith coming over several gaps to come on the blitz, and the rest of these guys are kind of manned up at this point. Orlando Brown, like you said, they're slant or they're slanting
Sliding.
right is sliding right. Slanting is the defensive line. Words are hard. And Mixon looking somewhere else doesn't see the defensive end getting around the sliding offensive line. And so you get the play that follows that involves buying the time, chucking it up to T high pointing, and
Fantastic.
awesome play from T Higgins. But you're going to have to make plays like this because I think when you play Brian Flores, inevitably you're going to get some protection cross ups. You're going to have some protection busts. You're going to have to extend the play. And for Jake Browning, not coming off the bench this week, having the week to prepare, his game is going to continue to be a gunslinger game. We know that, but some of the interceptions obviously need to be cleaned up. He knows that. And you typically don't get to have an opportunity to go win a game when you've thrown 3 picks in a half and change of football.
It's a fun brand of football. It's exciting. You don't really know what you're going to see. He only had a couple bad games in his 4-3 2023, and he had quite a few games that were actually good and
Yeah.
fun, at least to watch from our perspective and to talk about and discuss, and gave his receivers chances to go make plays. And as we saw in the last play there, that's at least exciting brand of football and gives you a reason to watch. There are still weapons all over on this team, and the weapons are even better now. Yeah, they don't have Tyler Boyd, and I eventually should have a discussion of what's going on at wide receiver 3, and maybe we can get some more of a rotation there. But the tight ends are much better. You saw Hudson out in there. It was Hudson and Irv Smith and Mitch Wilcox. They're much better at that position now. No Mixon, though, so you don't have the power run game. You're going to have to figure out the run game to support Jake Browning this time.
Yeah, no doubt. But you're right that you go look at Browning's career stats. There's a reason that the not knowers of football keep saying, well, why is the offense the same when Jake Browning's in there? Of course, you watch a game,
Right.
you very quickly see
You can
that
tell who
that it
doesn't
isn't the
watch the
same.
games when that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. But the point is that he's still producing and you still
Yeah.
have those weapons and you still have to deal with Jamar Chase and Jake Browning can get the ball to those guys. So hopefully it's fun to watch. Hopefully they remain a fun offense a little bit. I expect that as time goes on, we will be talking more about this defense. I think there are adjustments that Al Golden needs to make. We only talked about him in passing this week, but probably in the post game, probably in future shows, we're going to be digging into this Al Golden defense to see if it does have staying power, see if they are making the adjustments that they need to make as Al Golden is finding his footing again here in the NFL and adjusting to some of the things that have been around in the NFL. There's a reason I'm looking at the cover 3 adjustments article and dealing with all the cover 3 beaters with how much the
send
Bengals.
it to L.
Yeah. I think he's read it. I hope. But let's wrap up there. Remember, go find First Star Logistics on X, on Twitter for all the details about the giveaway this week. We got that Yeti tailgate set. And make sure you're here for the Jake and Joe Bengals post-game show after the game for a chance to win in the chat. And you'll find out most likely what we're giving away next week. And these giveaways have been on a real heater. The giveaways are awesome. The football talk is awesome. Hopefully we have a fun game to talk about for you on Sunday. And remember to check out firststarlogistics.com if you're interested in joining the team that works with Joe and I, that we love working with here on the First Star Logistics YouTube channel. You can join that team in the logistics department, the brokerage department as well, one of the fastest growing and best companies to work for in the Cincinnati area. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Jake and Joe Bengals preview show. We'll see you after the game on Sunday.